We're looking at some things on Sunday nights that last about 3 weeks. We're looking at the idea of church growth and some factors that are involved in understanding how we can do our part to help the church grow. And I've confessed that in a couple of these lessons, I've looked into some things that other people have written, some ideas that I have to give credit for to be fair. And tonight, I want to cite that I got some things from a gentleman whose name is Ed Stetzer. He is a doctor. I'm not sure whether it's PhD or a doctor of ministry, just exactly what that title is, at Wheaton College, and is one of the caretakers of some of the artifacts, the library, museum kinds of things that were related to Billy Graham and to his work. I'm not sure what all that involves, and I don't know the person. But he had some thoughts that I thought were worth beginning with as kind of seed thought in this idea of church growth. He really used it from the perspective of being a friendly church. I like something bigger than that concept of being friendly. We sometimes may not really get the whole grasp of that idea, because being a friendly church is a good thing. And it actually ought to be something that you should be able to take for granted. That whenever you say the word church, when you speak particularly of the Lord's church, I think it is something where you ought to be able to say, well, sure, that's a friendly group of people. That's a welcoming group of people. They're going to be hospitable and kind. They're going to be welcoming in every sense. We ought to be able to expect that, but then eventually we realize that's not necessarily true, that there are some places that, at least to guests, seem quite cold and unreceptive, and guests come and they say, well, it seemed cliquish. And they all got together with each other, and they visited a lot, and sure, they were friendly with each other, but they ignored us entirely. But that's not the kind of thing or kind of image that anybody wants. When you look at what the Lord has done to be sure that there is a church, you got to know that's not what he had in mind whatsoever. Whenever God was willing to plan eternally to have Jesus be born of the Virgin and be in this world, allow things to happen to him like him being cursed and threatened and challenged and spit on and eventually crucified and finally dying on the cross, in order that, according to Acts 20 and 28, his blood would purchase the church. God didn't have in mind anything but a very, very successful, loving, caring, outreach kind of family community that would exist in each church, I feel confident in saying. And in today's world, nearly everybody that I know really wants to be part of a friendly church, a church that's known, perceived, understood to be a friendly church. There was a time, and maybe that time's not entirely gone, when people were seeking not so much the aspect of friendly church, because they did take for granted at that point that the church would be friendly. But they wanted to be part of a growing church, a church that was on the move, so to speak. Some would say a church that was on fire. Many of the younger preachers that I've known in my lifetime have desired to preach for a growing church. Many of them want to preach for a big church. My advice always to them has been, if you want to preach for a big church, don't leave where you are and go to a big church. Build a big church where you are. That's the idea. But usually climbing that ladder is easier than building a church. In today's world, it is reported to be almost impossible. When across the brotherhood, and this, we don't really own the license on this. We're not unique in this, but I speak of us to us. Across the brotherhood, nearly all congregations in this country have either started to decline, some have died, or they have at least plateaued, so they're not changing, or they've died. There are not very many that are really on the rise. Of the ones that are on the rise, many have done some things and are doing some things that I would question if I put their practices down beside what the scriptures say. I'm not the judge, not the jury, and I'm most definitely not the executioner in regard to those things, but I would personally have serious issues. And tonight we can touch on a little bit of the reason why they may take that move. But when I use this title, Friendly Church, for tonight's lesson, I really, even this afternoon as I was analyzing it further, was realizing that what I want to say is, how does a church grow? What does a church have to be like in today's world in order to draw people, win converts, and grow? That's the big issue. Whenever I was a young preacher, frankly, the answer to that question was preach the gospel. Just preach and preach and preach, because lots and lots of people are hungry to hear the gospel truth. And if you'll have a strong pulpit and preach the word faithfully, the people will come. It was like that movie, Build It and They Will Come. I felt sure that if you build a strong pulpit, you build a strong church. The people will come. And I saw that happen in some cases. 3 different churches in succession where I worked, we baptized 100 people or more for a few years in each of those every year. And we built a couple of 1,200-seat auditoriums and filled them. And one I went to that already had a 1,200-seat auditorium, we continued the baptizing, and we started having 2 services in that auditorium. But haven't had that kind of experience in recent past. It's not that I've changed, the preaching has changed, it's that the culture in which we live has changed. And we can't get them in here to hear the preaching. So what do we have to do? The friendly church aspect is perceived by some to be an end in itself, that it is what you're trying to accomplish. But we're not trying to accomplish being a friendly church. We want to accomplish being a friendly church because that's what we are. But our goal is to win souls. And being a friendly church is a means to an end, but it's not the end in itself. We want that to be the thing that would cause us to be attractive to someone who is looking for a place and is looking for being received and enjoying some fellowship. That word fellowship is a sweet, gentle word. It comes from the same root word as sharing. It's kind of like giving. Whenever John in 1 John chapter 1 was talking about his and the relationship that he and the rest of the apostles had had with Jesus, he called it fellowship. And then he said, if we walk as he is in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with another, and the blood of Jesus cleanses us from all unrighteousness. It's the idea of we share things in common. We hold together because we are together and because of all that we have in common. That's the point of Ephesians chapter 4. We cite that very often, particularly verse 4, to teach that the church was one during New Testament times, and we believe that's still God's plan. But the overall concept there in the context is that we've got so many things that we share in common that it makes no sense that we would not be in total fellowship. that we would not be united. And so he speaks of keeping the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. That is, being in total fellowship with each other and sharing all things in common. How do we accomplish that? A lot of churches have made such an effort to, they'll even they'll create a group that's called the greeters or the welcoming team, and they train them. I think that's good. I think that's a no-brainer that we have people, as we do, positioned at the door back here where a lot of people come off the back parking lot, over here where a lot of people come from the south parking lot, and it wouldn't be too much to have somebody up by the office as well to welcome anybody who comes in there with a smile and a greeting and a welcome, and can we help you? Would you like us to help you find a class? And I've suggested before that particularly in the foyer where there's more room, there could be people who are on the ready to go to those people at the door and say, may we help you? And then have them sit with you during the worship service or take them to your class or help them find the right class for their children. That would be a friendly outreach to them, whether they're members of the church from another city or in this city, or if they're just strangers who are, as we put it often, looking for a church home. We desire, and people who are making these efforts, desire to present to a world that's different than what we've known before, an image that indicates that we are approachable, that we are friendly, and that we are agreeable. In the environment where so many people have no clue of what to expect when they come inside a church building. There are so many unchurched people out there who don't know what happens in these walls. Some of them have an image of that there are a lot of statues in here. They see on television a stage with lots of band instruments. And they hear, if they watch church on television, they see a lot of carrying on and things that we don't do. But they don't know that we don't. They may think they wouldn't be comfortable with that. Or if they become accustomed to that, they might think they wouldn't be comfortable with us. We don't know. And they'll never learn unless we're able to get to know them. And so with that, we have to understand they're intimidated. Intimidated about the idea of going to church. We're not so much saying go to church. We're saying come meet with us and let's share. Let's open the pages of God's Word. Let's find what Jesus taught and what the apostles taught. Let's practice Christianity like it was practiced during the first century. But we don't give a chance to ever explain that to people to whom we never get to talk. And so the people who are working hard to be perceived as approachable, friendly, and receptive, people who are even agreeable, are really trying to accomplish that. They're trying to give an image of you're welcome here. To that, I congratulate them. They have a good heart to wish to be approachable. But the sad part of it is that when you watch long enough, you realize that in order to seem approachable, some of them will dress down like they were going to a picnic at the beach. And they advertise, so come as you are. You don't have to dress up, and I don't mean that you do. But that's their theme of this is a casual thing. And just come anyway, doesn't matter. We just take, and so they're trying to be approachable. So they dress that way with the idea that if someone comes in, we won't make him uncomfortable because he'll look like we look. I'm not judging what people wear. I'm saying that's one of the ways that they try to make themselves seem approachable. Others think, well, those people have been watching television. If they have any idea of church, they're going to expect to be entertained. And so they try to offer the entertainment. And they add this and they add that. They have Christmas pageants and Easter cantatas, or it may be the other way around. I'm not real big on those. And they stage all those kinds of traditions like what we talked about this morning that in themselves are not bad, but if presented as though they are the gospel truth and part of New Testament worship, then they've overstepped biblical authority, to say the very least. But it's in an effort to say, let's see if this works. Leaders in many churches have decided, let's find out what'll sell. Let's find out what'll, quote, get them in. And then, in an effort to try to be approachable and just like you guys, so to speak, they compromise some things that may be, in fact, biblical, doctrinal, and eternally important. We don't want to go there, but we do want to be, and we do want to seem a friendly church. We want to be a friendly church, but we need to be more than a friendly church. As I said a while ago, that's not the end itself. It's a means to an end. But beyond being a friendly church, and this is part of what the gentleman in his article suggested, that the church needs to be not just friendly, but caring, really caring about the people, caring about the ones who do come. That's what the scriptures teach. And the next step is to do that, because it's been discovered, and I think that if people just sit down and think about it, they would come to this conclusion anyway. But what the people, the ones out there who are seeking, what they're seeking in coming to a friendly church is friends. They're looking for friends. Now, you've got the fellowship of the church already. And many of you have also the fellowship of a good, deep-rooted, spiritual and moral, physical family as well. But the people we're reaching out to largely do not have that background, and they do not have that association. They are, if they're associating with anyone, associating with people who don't have their mind on God, Jesus, morals, anything like that, and haven't been into a worship assembly in 10 years or 20 years. They don't know a single preacher, or a married one either. They don't know anybody who could be a spiritual guide to them. And that's their interaction with those people. If they are baseline alert to what life is supposed to be for them, they realize, I need a friend. I need somebody who can lift me up. I need somebody. My family needs a mentoring family. A man out there who doesn't know how to be a dad needs a good dad to be a mentor. A mother who doesn't know what to do with her daughters needs a good mentoring woman who can teach. And she would be smart to realize, I'd find that in church. At that friendly church, I might find somebody who cares what's going on with me. That would be the ultimate of what they are looking for. And they might not find it in just a friendly church. Because a friendly church can ultimately just become a greeting church. While I don't mean at all to do anything that would be derogatory on the idea of having greeters and all of that, if that's as deep as we go, that isn't meeting the needs of those who are bleeding. We have to go further. Indeed, make them feel welcome, reach out to them in every way we can, but besides becoming the greeting church, we have to become the caring church. The caring church is essentially what last fall, whenever we had the several different congregations all met at one place over on Hillside, wasn't it, south of 96, in that rented building, the young man who came up from Edmond, Oklahoma, was talking about integrating the people into the congregation. Basically, that's what he was talking about here. Is it's more than just having them attend and shake their hand and say, "We're glad you came." It's more than that when we care and we seek to empathize with them. We seek to not only assimilate them into the congregation, but integrate them into what the church is doing so that they belong. That's the caring church, where people in friendships learn about each other. They create community. They create, as it were, little family niches where you know what's happening with my children and I know what's happening with yours. Where we talk about the things that we concern us. And we talk about the great suffering that may be happening in a child's family of ours. We know that about each other. And these are people who have those kinds of circumstances, and they need somebody to know and somebody to care. I guess the most interesting thing that the gentleman said in his article is one that I'd like to quote for you, just pulling out part of what he said. He said, "You can't be a caring church when you're always sitting in the sanctuary, facing forward, lined up like we're on a shelf at Walmart." And what he's suggesting is that we've got to have some face time. We've got to sit down with each other outside this assembly where you all sit together and look forward and never see the people who are very far to one side or the other or behind you, and not so much but the back of the head of someone that's sitting in front, but where we do engage each other in conversation with realistic communication. That could be happening if we invited those folks to our house. It might happen to a lesser degree if we invite them to dinner at some public place and do that. Or we meet them somewhere for coffee on some day other than Sunday and talk with them, or go to a ball game together, or whatever the two of you might enjoy doing. That interaction starts to happen because friendship is offered on a level other than, "Hey, how you doing?" and moving on as we pass in the foyer. But we get ingrained into the other person's life. It's a word like involvement and investment. In a caring church, people get invested with others who are a part of that. And they're willing to put themselves out to some degree to help and to make that work. That's what we do in the caring church. We examine ourselves. Paul urged in 1 Corinthians that we examine ourselves whether we are in the faith. Do some dipstick work. You know, those dipsticks of life they're there for a reason. And we check the oil and the other fluids in our cars. Once in a while, the little dipstick of my faith needs also to be checked. How am I doing here? Am I low? Do I need some inspiration myself in order to make sure that I'm doing the right things? Attending church is something we always encourage because we ought to get a lot of what we need here, but there's more to Christianity than faithful attendance. There's the engagement with other people for the sake of their souls. And so The third step, moving beyond being a friendly church to becoming a caring church, is then exceeded by the third thing he suggested, and that is becoming a carrying church. Friendly, caring, carrying church. And he cited Galatians chapter 6. You may remember that in the first couple of verses of Galatians chapter 6, Paul said, you who are spiritual. He addresses those who, like the people who come on Sunday night. He said, if anyone among you is overtaken in a fault, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest you also should be tempted. For he said, bear one another's burdens, and by so doing, fulfill the whole law of God. He's saying, realize that if the other person is stumbling, if he's got cares and burdens that he can't cope with, there but by the grace of God go I. He doesn't need me to condemn him. He needs me to help him. He needs me to lift him up. He needs me to help him through. And I do realize I'm no better than he is. The grace of God has, by his providence, put me perhaps in a better condition or situation right now. But in a year or 6 months, I may be the one who's needing someone to lift me. And whenever he refers to keeping the whole law of God, I think he's alluding to the same concept that Jesus did when the man said to him, what's the first and great commandment? Jesus answered quickly, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That's the first commandment. But then he volunteered. I've always thought that the guy who asked the question was surprised whenever he volunteered the second part of it, saying, and the second one is like this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. If you put those two together, loving God and loving our fellow man, in the song we say loving God, loving each other. Loving God keeps us from sinning against him, and loving our fellow man keeps us from sinning against him. But it also, on the positive side, puts us into the role of trying to help him, being his support system. Later in the chapter, in verse 10, Paul said, as you have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially those of the household of faith. Help everybody you can, but especially the brethren. The caring church reaches down, and with empathy and sympathy, they take hold of the hand of the people who are hurting, and they offer them the assistance that they need. Now, a friendly church would look at that kind of need and very possibly never recognize what it really is. They might not ever sense that this person is in trouble because they're not that engaged in his life, not that familiar with what's happening. But even if they did, a friendly church might say, well, that's kind of a family thing. That's familial. His family ought to take care of that. That's their responsibility. Not realizing that we are the family. And in the church, since we are the family, we're the body. Paul in 1 Corinthians 12 and in Romans 12 both talked about the fact, using the analogy of the human body related to what the church is like. And he says the hand can't say to the foot, I have no need of you. The ear can't say to the eye, I have no need of you. We all need all the parts, and when everything is functioning properly and well and cooperating, we have a wonderful system in the human body. But when something doesn't work, it's another kind of deal. I got something this afternoon that if I can pull it up here, I tried to leave it where it would be ready, and somebody tried to call me while I was talking. Thank you, whoever you were. Background on this, and I try not to use all my illustrations on a private or a personal basis because some people don't like that. Someone was real kind just a few days ago when I brought up some personal things. They said, I like it when you bring in the personal things. And I thought, you're a breath of fresh air. I like telling personal stories. Dad used to say that old preachers just told so many personal stories they couldn't get anything else done. Later I figured out the young guys didn't have any personal stories yet, or they might do it too. So they go read to you part of a book. But in 1966, way back, kids. In 1966, I moved from a great metropolis in the panhandle of Texas to the city of Seagoville. A lot of people think that must be on the coast of Texas. It's not. It's in Dallas County. And why it got that, I don't know. Some call it Seagullville, but there didn't used to be. There are probably some around there now. I was met by two elders in that church. Brother Mathis was one of the two, and I was closer to him through the years just because we seemed to have more in common. Troy was a postman and an elder. And after I was gone at 54, he retired from the post office and became a full-time elder. He'd only done that less than 2 years when he suddenly died of a heart attack, and I came back from Miami and did his funeral. His wife became kind of my first other mother during that time. Pauline is her name. And Pauline is still living, but barely. She's on hospice. I believe she's at or just past 100 years of age. I've watched on Facebook the reports. Their second son, I convinced while there to preach, and he got some training and went out and preached, and he still preaches. He went to the Northeast eventually and still is there. I've been watching the stories on Facebook about Pauline and hurting for them all. And today, Wayne posted this. And I thought how timely, because what he's describing is not necessarily a growing church. I don't know particularly whether it's a friendly church, but I suspect it is. I can tell it's a caring church from what he says. I believe it must be a carrying church. And I thought, I'd like to just read his note. I haven't contacted him to ask permission. So if you see him, don't tell him I did it. But here's what he said. If churches were measured by the size of their hearts, I'm privileged to preach for the largest. Our church of 11, 13 during the summer months, not only insisted that I make a trip to Texas to see my mother, who's now in hospice, my 5th this year, but today we received gifts from the church and their families additionally to pay for the trip. No church anywhere can love more than this. An additional thank you to two people he notices here who are lending us their van to make our trip more comfortable. His wife Joyce has her own health problems. I'm sure the van is helpful for that. But when you think of 11 people in the church in a mission point, I don't remember if it's Connecticut or Delaware, somewhere the church is not strong. And they provided this man opportunity 5 times this year to go back and see his mom. And on this occasion, they've given sufficient money and loaned a vehicle. I think that's a carrying church. don't you? And I believe that's the kind of thing that God would smile to see. And that the world out there that's lost is looking for. They're not necessarily looking for the biggest, finest building in the city. They're not looking for the most elaborate accommodations. They're not looking for the fanciest, most well-spoken preacher. They're not looking for somebody who dresses just right all the time. But the lost and lonely, unchurched people are looking for someone who cares and will display it by being friendly and, when necessary, carrying them. The application is that we members need to think about the idea that we're members of the church. Suggest the concept to the contrary might be dismember. When we might lose one of our limbs, we'd sure know it, and we'd miss it. When we lose a member, we know it, and we'd miss it. We don't want to lose any. We want to gain, but we don't want anybody going out the back door. We want the front door to be busy with people coming in, but never have anyone who exits because they didn't get the love or the care or the concern that they felt they were looking for in this church. I remember Winston Atkinson long ago talking about this kind of thing, and he said, if I hit my thumb with a hammer, it only hurts the thumb, but the rest of my body sits up with it all night long. That's the kind of fellowship and support system and integration and involvement that we're talking about. And even if no one else did ever come to us because of that, it would sure be healthy for those of us who are here to have that kind of system always for each other. I'm not putting down what we have. I'm talking about the goal, the aim, that mark to which we would be shooting, carrying through with that familial responsibility and relationship so that we grow deeper in a level of community than what we have yet reached, where we bear one another's burdens, where we confess our sins to each other, as James 5:16 said, confess your faults one to another, pray you one for another that she may be healed, and we get the benefit of prayer. For he concluded by saying, the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Having deep compassion for each other, we involve and invest in each other and reach the point where we really do feel that there's no one who's too heavy. You remember that old sign from long ago where one boy is carrying another, and he says, he ain't heavy, he's my brother. And when we feel that way about each other, then we're going to get along. We're going to love, and we're going to draw people. The ones who are looking for a friend, and they find it in church. And we find ways to lift them up. We find ways to help them and make life better for them by sharing the load, by lifting our side of it, and going deeper, embodying the love of Jesus and displaying it by the way we live. I believe that those are ingredients, not just in being friendly, deeper than caring, but the point that we illustrate really what Jesus and God wanted the family to be in every congregation in every city upon the earth, and would then be able to say, you are the light of the world. A city set upon a hill cannot be hidden. You are the salt of the earth, the saving power. That's who we are. That's our job. That's what we do. And the more we study it and think of it, the more that individuals among us apply ourselves to it, the better we will get at doing it. And the more God will be glorified. And isn't that what it's all about? Paul said, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. May he bless us as we work together, as we serve him. But as we serve him, we serve his people of our community, and we reach out hoping they will open up and they will come in because they're welcome. If you're subject to the invitation of Jesus for any reason tonight, you're welcome. We'll sing a song of encouragement. We invite you to come. If you've never become a Christian, tonight you could. You're welcome. If you're part of the kingdom, you've erred and drifted, if you're lonely, you're hurting, and you need help, you need to let somebody know it. You might want to do it publicly or you might not. But if you do, you're welcome. You can come while we stand and sing.